All right, it's 9 a.m. Saturday morning, and we are live. We're starting our second installment of the Revelation Bible Study. This is session 2, the signs of his coming. So I'm going to go ahead and do a review of what we did talk about the last time, just to catch us up to where we are. The first two parts were the first two series or first two videos in the series on from the Fuel Project, and the first was called "We Have Tribulation," and so it was talked about statistics about the most persecuted people group in the world being Christians. Okay, I see that you didn't see those. Well, the first or the most persecuted people group in the world were Christians, and or are Christians now, and that was surprising to me because of course, would think it would be something else because in the United States we don't have issues with real hard persecution here. But we did talk about some of those statistics, and we talked about, I talked about a video, not a video, but I hear my phone ringing, a dream that I'd had about persecution of Christians. In this video, there was a woman who was drawing out a cartoon of conception and birth of a child on her body. She was drawing it in her own blood. And then right after I woke up from that dream, the scripture about that suddenly that people will say peace and safety, but then sudden destruction would come upon them. That's in 1 Thessalonians 5. It says, for when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. You are children of light and children of the day. We are not of the night, nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep in the night, and that be drunken are drunken in the night. But let us who are of the day and sober, putting on the breastplate of the breastplate of faith and love, and helmet the hope of salvation. For God has not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation by our Lord Jesus Christ. And so I think it's important for us to take heed to the signs that we do see coming. I had put this series out there earlier in the month of July. And I was like, well, I'm having troubles with the technology. I didn't know whether I should go ahead and do it. And then it seemed like almost every week something was happening in the world that reminded me this is what I need to be doing at this point in time. So I'm encouraged that the Lord is speaking to us in this day and in this time regarding the end times. And so we did look at what was happening in the world around us, and that we as Christians do have tribulation. But we also looked at tribulation through the ages. We saw that there was a pattern that generally when persecution of Christians around the world is getting worse, that it starts out with a change in the laws, and then it goes on to confiscation of property, and then it goes on to searching of homes, and then arrests, and then public executions. All these things have been happening around the world. Of course, in the Middle East, and as I posted a little bit earlier this week, that what's happening in the Middle East is now spreading to North Africa, and that Christians are being pushed out of areas there and being executed there. Earlier this year, there was at Garissa University, a Christian college, or where a lot of Christians were. 147 Christians were, I think it was 147 Christians were killed just out of the blue because they were Christians. So we see this spreading, we see this happening at this point in time, and I do believe that the Spirit is speaking to us expressly about some of these things. So we're ready to go ahead and get started and talk about what we're talking about today, and those are the signs of his coming. So
On the Mount of Olives, Jesus' disciples asked him what signs there would be to signal his return and the end of the world. Jesus' response has become known as the Olivet Discourse. This is how Matthew records it. As Jesus was leaving the temple grounds, his disciples pointed out to him the various temple buildings. But he responded, "Do you see all these buildings? I tell you the truth, they will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another." Later, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately and said, "Tell us, when will all this happen? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world?" Jesus told them, "Don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am the Messiah.' They will deceive many, and you will hear of wars and threats of wars. But don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world, but all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. Then you will be arrested, persecuted, and killed. You will be hated all over the world because you are my followers, and many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other." The very first thing that Jesus tells his disciples to watch out for is an increase in false religion led by false messiahs. John wrote, "Dear children, the last hour is here. You have heard that the Antichrist is coming, and already many such Antichrists have appeared. From this we know that the last hour has come." So prior to the appearance of the Antichrist, there will be many little Antichrists. This will be the first sign of his coming. Jesus then says that there will be an increase of war and threats of war. The geopolitical landscape will become increasingly tumultuous. There will be also an increase in famines and natural disasters. Jesus describes all these problems as birth pains. The significance of this metaphor is that birth pains increase in intensity and frequency as time rolls on. This is how it will be with all these things. Next, Jesus says, "Then you will be arrested, persecuted, and killed. You will be hated all over the world because you are my followers, and many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other." How will this be a specific sign of the end? After all, if persecution has been normal throughout all history, it can hardly be considered a sign just because it's still happening at the end of time. However, the specific sign that Jesus is telling us about is that it will get noticeably worse. The birth pains metaphor applies once more. In fact, this is almost certainly describing a kind of end-time genocide. So bad will it be that many Christians will buckle under the pressure and, for the sake of comfort, denounce their faith and join the crowd. Many Christians will even find themselves betrayed by those who should have been their friends and partners in the gospel. This puts us in mind of Judas betraying Christ himself. The news that Christianity is now the world's most persecuted religion isn't a surprise. The news that the persecution is increasing isn't a surprise. We're merely seeing the words of Jesus coming to life before our very eyes. We are witnessing the birth pains. Do birth pains ever get easier? Not at all. As such, we must look to the future knowing that things aren't going to get easier, they're going to get worse. Jesus continues on the Mount of Olives saying, "And many false prophets will appear and will deceive many people. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And the good news about the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world, so that all nations will hear it, and then the end will come." We're going to need endurance in the end times. Endurance right up until the very end. Sin is going to be rampant. People will become more selfish. Love is going to grow cold. This isn't a pleasant picture. Having given that general picture for the whole world, Jesus then focuses on the things that must occur specifically in Israel before the end comes. The day is coming when you will see what Daniel the prophet spoke about, the sacrilegious object that causes desecration standing in the holy place. Reader, pay attention. Then those in Judea must flee to the hills. A person out on the deck of a roof must not go down into the house to pack. A person out in the field must not return even to get a coat. How terrible it will be for pregnant women and for nursing mothers in those days. And pray that your flight will not be in winter or on the Sabbath. For there will be greater anguish than at any time since the world began, and it will never be so great again. In fact, unless that time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive. but it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones. Jesus is describing an end-time event known as Jacob's trouble, whereby Israel will be attacked and trampled upon during the reign of the Antichrist. This event was prophesied through the Old Testament prophets, and Jesus can't return until it has happened. The Old Testament prophet Daniel especially was given a lot of insight on this issue. He was told that the Antichrist would raise up an idolatrous statue on Temple Mount, and that would be their cue to flee to the wilderness. Those who don't escape would be persecuted severely and killed. Jeremiah also prophesied about this day when he said, "I hear cries of fear, there is terror and no peace." Now let me ask you a question. Do men give birth to babies? Then why do they stand there ashen-faced, hands pressed against their sides like a woman in labour? In all history, there has never been such a time of terror. It will be a time of trouble for my people Israel. God tells Israel that their allies will desert them at this time. All your lovers, your allies, have left you and do not care about you anymore. Paul wrote to the Thessalonians about this time as well, saying, "When people are saying everything is peaceful and secure, then disaster will fall on them as suddenly as a pregnant woman's labor pains begin, and there will be no escape." Notice how every single one of these verses about the end times, and specifically Israel's trouble, mentions birth pains. This is not coincidence. Things are going to get worse. Jesus continues with more information, saying, "Then if anyone tells you, 'Look, here is the Messiah,' or 'There he is,' don't believe it, for false messiahs and false prophets will rise up and perform great signs and wonders so as to deceive, if possible, even God's chosen ones. See, I have warned you about this ahead of time. So if someone tells you, 'Look, the Messiah is out in the desert,' don't bother to go and look. Or 'Look, he is hiding here,' don't believe it. For as the lightning flashes in the east and shines to the west, so it will be when the Son of Man comes. Just as the gathering of vultures shows there is a carcass nearby, so these signs indicate that the end is near." For a third time here, Jesus warns us against the deception of false religion. Clearly this is something he is very keen to stress. He tells us that when he returns, there won't be any doubt about it. The whole sky will light up like a flash of lightning to herald his return. Jesus then gives us a very important reference point. He says, "Immediately after the anguish of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will give no light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. And then at last, the sign that the Son of Man is coming will appear in the heavens, and there will be deep mourning among all the peoples of the earth. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with the mighty blast of a trumpet, and they will gather his chosen ones from all over the world, from the farthest ends of the earth and heaven." I've emphasized the word after and the words "and then at last" because they are giving us a chronological timeline of events. After the increase in false religion, after all of the false prophets, after the increase in wars and threats of wars, after the increase in natural disasters and famines, after the persecution of Christians, after many of those turn away from the faith, after the increase in sin which leads to the hardened hearts and cynicism, after the sacrilegious idol is set up in Jerusalem, after all of those things, the sun and moon will go dark and the stars will fall from the sky. And then at last, Jesus comes to gather his chosen ones from all over the world. Very simply, the timeline that Jesus sets out for us is suffering and tribulation first, then the sun and moon going dark, and then, at last, the rapture. There will be no rapture until after the tribulation and the sun and moon have gone dark. That means that many of God's people will be here for the famines and natural disasters. They'll be here for the increase in false religion and false prophets. They'll be here for the increase in wars. They'll be here for the increase in persecution and hatred. They'll be here for a time of destruction for Jerusalem. They'll be here until the lights go down. No wonder Jesus says to his followers that they will need endurance in those times. Will the Christian church go through the tribulation? That's the big question that everyone wants to know when they read the book of Revelation. And that's why I've started our study of the book here with this foundation. I wanted to highlight that the Bible promises us tribulation. It's natural and perhaps even necessary. I also wanted to highlight that throughout history, we have always had tribulation. It's rarely been any other way. And finally, I wanted to highlight that we currently do have tribulation. We have tribulation right now, today. The church is currently the most persecuted people group in the world. The Olivet Discourse simply tells us that it's going to get worse. And that's the sobering foundation that we must put in place before we turn to the book of Revelation itself.
There's a long cornerstone. Weighs how much, Ryan?
I think
247 tons. Stuff is pushed from up on top here. And it falls down, crushing the walkway, the sidewalk. You can still see 2,000 years later where it landed. There's the rubble that fell from the wall from 70 AD when the Romans pushed it down. This obviously has been cleared off. But the crushing and the impression that left still remains. This is Robinson's Arch right here. This was an arch that came out of the top of the temple, turned and went down a stairway, and came down the stairs right here. These are the shops. And this is the bazaar here where he would sell stuff to the people, control the whole marketplace around the temple. These were the shops that were outside the temple walls right now.
Christianity's central place in British culture is looking increasingly under threat, with church attendance numbers in constant decline. Now, meanwhile, the country's second largest religion, Islam, is growing faster than ever, with some studies suggesting it's on the way to becoming the dominant faith. RT's Polly Boyko has the story.
Half of Brits say they're Christians, but you wouldn't know it glancing at this London service.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son,
and of the Holy Spirit.
New figures show that the UK's official religion is declining faster than was previously thought. Worshippers are aging, and for the first time ever, fewer than half under the age of 25 describe themselves as Christian.
The decline of churches in the UK is long term. It just happens to be now approaching really rock bottom. So 95% of people don't attend a church on an average Sunday.
While the Church of England struggles, the Office for National Statistics says that the number of Muslims in England and Wales has surged by 75%. And they're young. Half of British Muslims are under the age of 25.
I'm looking at the swathes of men in the hall down below. What is it that draws them here?
That's the big question. Motivation theory is very, very different for different people. Islam's family values are very well bonded, and families really try to nurture young people in the fold of Islam. We have more than 50% congregation from the young people, because we try to deal with the young people's issues, so they feel part of the mosque establishment.
Religious think tank The Pew Forum estimates that if present trends continue, the Muslim population of the UK will swell to almost double within 20 years, totalling 5.5 million. According to these figures, it means that by 2030, Britain will have more Muslims than Kuwait.
It's projects such as this community-based Muslim radio station that could provide the clue as to why the religion is flourishing in the UK. In that booth, DJs who call themselves brothers and sisters talk about local issues and education from the point of view of Islam.
Inspire started out as a special transmission during the holy month of Ramadan. It became so popular that it was established as a permanent radio station.
It's actually a lot of pressure on the husband or anything.
It comes with an Islamic ethos that we won't do anything which is deemed non-Islamic on air. Hence, the music element, one may question about the fact that of the music that we play on the radio station. We won't have your mainstream music playing on there because majority of it isn't deemed Islamic. We wouldn't advertise anything un-Islamic in the sense that we wouldn't have any adverts for alcohol. We won't have any adverts for, say, for example, gambling, all those kind of things.
According to academics, it's the obedience that Islam demands from its followers that's made it more appealing to worshippers and converts from other religions.
Islam says no. This is no and full stop, and people find a sense of direction in it because their religion of origin has lost that, not because that it didn't have it in the first instance. They sort of became lenient in relation to the laws of the church, and thinking that in this way they would make it more mellow and softer and attract more people into the church. And in fact, they've lost people.
Something that the Church of England disagrees with. They claim that the death of Christian England has been greatly exaggerated and that the statistics don't reflect the true faith of the population. And yet there are demographers that say that if current trends continue, Islam could eclipse Christianity as the dominant religion in the UK in as little as 10 years' time. Polly Boyko, RT, London.
He enters this hotel conference room in Hartford, Connecticut with a security team that rivals a head of state. An adoring audience greets him with calls of daddy and sings his praises. He is 60-year-old Jose Luis de Jesus Miranda from Puerto Rico, a preacher, an evangelist to be sure, but to his followers and in his own eyes, he's more than a man of God. Just ask him.
I'm Jesus Christ's man in front of you.
That's right. He says he is the second coming. He claims in 1973 he had an epiphany.
When Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, came to me, he integrated himself within me.
So why you?
I don't know.
In the mid-'80s, Miranda started his own ministry called Creciendo en Gracia, or Growing in Grace. It's a religious movement that claims a presence in more than 20 countries, mostly in Central and South America, but also in the United States. From Hartford to his headquarters in Miami, he says there are more than 30 teaching centers nationwide.
We don't give membership cards. So I don't know how many I have, but certainly are millions. Every week we grow.
And with a 24-hour cable channel, netcasts of his sermons and radio programs, Miranda is out to spread the word. Those who believe him, like these followers in Miami, the Son of Man is back, also embrace his unique interpretation of the Bible. For example, sin no longer exists.
God doesn't see you as a sinner. For me, you are a perfect spirit.
There's also no such thing as the devil.
Satan is a Hollywood character.
As for prayer, he says it's a waste of time, and he calls all other religious leaders liars.
The lies began in Rome. I'm against all those teachings from Catholic, Protestant, evangelicals. They're not teaching the right gospel.
His followers say Miranda is the only one telling the truth, and that his teachings have set them free.
I thank him so much for being able to look myself in the mirror and knowing that I'm seeing him in me and that I could literally love myself.
But one common church practice that Miranda doesn't dismiss is the use of the collection plate.
Do people have to pay to be part of this?
No.
They do have to donate.
They make donations according to the Bible, you know, the tithing.
The Bible asks for 10% tithing.
Yeah.
But your followers do much more than that.
Because of the...
They give their companies, they give their...
Oh, they give everything.
His most generous followers have even given him cars and estates, including a home inside this gated community, which Miranda recently sold for close to $1 million.
So you don't have a problem with material wealth?
Everybody should be rich.
One who is giving his share of riches to Miranda is Alvaro Albarracin, a successful web entrepreneur. He says he owes everything to Miranda, and his donations have topped 7 figures.
I'm putting all my money and heart that this is the truth.
But Albarracin's relationship with Miranda has cost him personally. He's estranged from his family.
How many years has it been since you've spoken with him? 4.
Regina Albarracin says her son severed ties after they suggested he was being brainwashed by Miranda and his teachings.
It's not healthy for people. It's not good for people. It's not good for families. Many families, he destroyed many families.
Other religious leaders say Miranda may be capable of destroying much more.
I think any group whose leader says, I am God, and you have to listen to me and follow me because I am God, that group is very dangerous for our society.
Father Albert Coutier says he and members of his congregation in Miami have been harassed by Miranda's followers.
Well, I think that their tactics are strange. And what I've experienced personally is aggression, screaming.
In fact, Growing in Grace admits it has launched a protest campaign against other religions, like this peaceful one in Miami. But other gatherings have become more confrontational.
Is there any limit to what your followers will do for you?
Well, we try to do it very politely. You know, something might get out of hand once in a while because, you know, some people, they fight back.
You encourage that, though?
I encourage to march for the truth.
All this has led some to worry that Growing in Grace may be a new cult.
Growing in Grace does appear to fit the primary criteria of a destructive cult. An absolute authoritarian leader, a process of persuasion that can be seen as brainwashing, and then finally, exploitation of the members.
If it's a cult, it's the best cult I ever seen. This is a nice cult. I'm proud to lead a cult like this because I'm teaching the truth.
A UN study said on Tuesday economic losses due to natural disasters have tripled over the past decade, with farmers bearing nearly a quarter of the burden in poor countries. Floods, droughts, storms, and other natural disasters cost the agricultural sector in developing countries $70 billion in damages between 2003 and 2013, said the study by the Food and Agriculture Organization released during an international conference on reducing disaster risk in Sendai, Japan. Asia was the worst affected region with $28 billion in losses, followed by Africa's $26 billion, said the study, which analyzed data from 78 disasters in 48 developing countries.
For the last 20 years, Open Doors has been producing the World Watch List, which ranks the top 50 countries where it is most difficult to be a Christian. This well-researched report is compiled by a group of experts, audited by an outside organisation specialising in religious freedom, and it is credited as the best and most authoritative report of its kind. Through on-the-ground interviews and data analysis, this list provides an accurate picture of the difficulties persecuted Christians experience around the world. The World Watch List looks at and measures the types of persecution believers experience from the government, community, and even their own families. It also looks into the restrictions Christians face in their private lives and their ability to meet and worship with other Christians. But the list is not just numbers and figures. It represents those who have decided to follow Jesus, no matter what the cost may be. In many countries, believers encounter intimidation, prison, or in some countries, even death. Persecution is a daily reality for millions of believers across the world. In 2014, Christians experienced intense persecution in a number of countries. In North Korea, which is ranked #1 for 13 years in a row, it is estimated that 50 to 70,000 Christians are imprisoned for their faith. Iraq moved to #3 on the list and has seen a mass exodus of Christians as a result of the Muslim extremist group, the Islamic State. It is estimated that 140,000 Christians have been displaced as a result. Nigeria's rank rose to #10 for the first time ever. It is estimated that there have been an average of 10 people killed daily by the Islamic extremist group Boko Haram, and most are Christians. We invite you to learn more and pray for the millions of believers around the world where persecution is a reality.